The scent hit me first: pine, earth, and something wild that made my pulse quicken. The great hall of the northern pack teemed with bodies, voices rising and falling like tide against rock, but I remained pressed against the cold stone wall, invisible despite the celebration swirling around me. My fingers clutched the small wooden wolf pendant hanging from my neck, my mother's last gift before the fever took her 3 winters ago. "Remember, Elise," she had whispered, her once golden hair like mine now dull against the pillow. "Sometimes the quietest voice carries the most truth." I hadn't understood then. Now, at 22, standing among the strongest werewolf packs gathered for the Lunar Alliance, I was painfully aware of how quiet, how irrelevant, my voice truly was. The ornate chandeliers cast golden light across faces flushed with wine and excitement. Alpha representatives from 7 territories filled the room with their presence, each movement deliberate, each laugh calculated. Their inner circles followed in coordinated orbits, beta wolves maintaining vigilance while their chosen omegas displayed perfect posture and practiced smiles. And then there was me, the omega who couldn't shift properly, the one whose wolf remained stunted, incomplete, a shameful secret my pack had hidden for years. "Stop hiding, Elise," Mira appeared beside me, her dark eyes sparkling with the fearlessness that made her the only friend I had in our mid-mountain pack. As a beta, she moved through the world with certainty I could only dream of. "Alpha Marcus will notice you're missing from our delegation. He hasn't noticed me in 22 years, I muttered, tugging at the simple blue dress that marked me as the lowest-ranking member of our group. "Besides, I'm doing everyone a favor. What if I accidentally touch someone and they realize I can't—" "Nonsense!" She grabbed my elbow, guiding me toward the center of the hall. "The northern wolves are distracted by their own display. No one will notice you." I stumbled forward, anxiety clawing at my throat. The room had grown even more crowded as servants navigated between guests with trays of blood-red wine and delicacies I'd never seen before. The northern pack spared no expense to showcase their wealth and power, particularly now that their alpha king had returned from 2 years of mysterious absence, bringing his young son to be introduced to the Alliance. "There," Mira whispered, nodding toward the raised platform at the head of the hall. "That's him." I didn't need to ask which him she meant. Even among alphas, he commanded attention like gravity commands the tide. Tall, with shoulders that could carry mountains, he stood half-turned away from the crowd. His hair was dark as midnight, shot through with silver at the temples despite appearing no older than 35. When he shifted slightly, the candlelight caught his profile: strong jaw, straight nose, and eyes that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. Alpha King Evren of the Northern Territories, the most powerful shifter in 7 packs. "And that's the pup," Mira continued, gesturing to a small figure darting between guests, a flash of dark hair and boundless energy. "Prince Theo. They say he's extraordinarily powerful already, even at 7. The child moved too quickly for me to see properly, but there was something both wild and vulnerable about his movements that made my heart twist unexpectedly. I had always felt drawn to the pack younglings, perhaps because they, like me, existed on the periphery of power. "I need air," I murmured, the press of bodies suddenly overwhelming. My wolf stirred uneasily beneath my skin. Not the full-bodied presence others described, but a fragmentary whisper I could never quite grasp. Mira frowned. "Don't go far. The welcome ceremony starts soon and—" "Just 5 minutes," I promised, already backing away. I slipped through the crowd, head down, body angled to avoid contact. Years of making myself small had perfected the art of invisibility. A corridor branched off from the main hall, cooler air beckoning. I followed it blindly, the sounds of celebration fading with each step, until I found myself in a small interior garden. Stone benches surrounded a pool where water trickled from the mouth of a carved wolf. The stars glittered overhead through an opening in the ceiling, and for the first time since arriving at the northern stronghold, I could breathe. My fingers found the pendant again, tracing its familiar curves. "What am I doing here, Mother?" I whispered to the night sky. "I don't belong in this world. Neither do I, sometimes." The small voice startled me so badly I nearly fell into the pool. Spinning around, I found myself face to face with a child, dark-haired and solemn-eyed, dressed in formal clothes that seemed to constrain his natural energy. Prince Theo. I dropped immediately to one knee, head bowed, heart hammering. Your Highness, I apologize for the intrusion. I didn't. Please don't do that, he interrupted, his voice surprisingly steady for a child. Everyone bows and calls me Highness, but never looks at me. Hesitantly, I raised my eyes to meet his. They were extraordinary, amber flecked with gold, already holding wisdom beyond his years. What's your name? He asked. Elise, I answered softly. From the mid-mountain pack, he nodded solemnly, as if cataloging this information. Why did you say you don't belong? The question, so direct, caught me off guard. I found myself answering honestly before I could think better of it. I'm not what I'm supposed to be. Me neither, he confided, stepping closer. In the moonlight, I could see shadows beneath his eyes. Father says I'm supposed to be strong all the time, but sometimes I get scared. My heart melted. Without thinking, I reached out and took his small hand in mine. Being scared doesn't make you weak, you're high. Theo. It makes you wise. His fingers tightened around mine. You smell nice. Like honey and flowers. The others smell like they're trying too hard. A startled laugh escaped me. That's because they are. Father is making me meet everyone tonight, he continued, voice dropping to a whisper. But they all look at me like I'm a thing, not a person. I understood that feeling too well. Would you like to practice? Meeting someone who sees you as a person, I mean. His face brightened instantly. Yes! I straightened up and extended my hand formally. Prince Theo of the Northern Territories, I'm honored to make your acquaintance. I hope we might be friends. He giggled, a sound of pure childhood that seemed to dispel some of the garden's shadows, and shook my hand with exaggerated formality. The honor is mine, Lady Elise. Oh, I'm not a lady, I corrected gently. Just an Omega. His nose wrinkled in confusion. But you feel important. Before I could process what he meant, he stepped forward and wrapped his arms around my waist in a tight hug. The gesture was so unexpected, so innocent, that tears pricked at my eyes. I returned the embrace gently, feeling a strange protectiveness surge through me. Theo, I said softly. We should probably return to A low, warning growl cut through the night air like a blade. Step away from my son. The voice was deep, commanding. It resonated not just in my ears, but in my bones, my blood. The fragmentary wolf inside me suddenly alert and straining toward it. I froze, arms still around the child who now clung to me more tightly. I raised my eyes slowly, already knowing who I would see. Alpha King Evren filled the garden entrance, his massive frame blocking all escape. In the moonlight, his features were sharper, more predatory than they had appeared in the hall. His eyes, those extraordinary eyes, had shifted from human dark to wolf amber, fixed on where my hands touched his son. Father. Theo's voice held equal parts excitement and apprehension, but he made no move to leave my embrace. I found a friend. Did you? It wasn't a question, but a statement of barely contained fury. The Alpha King took one step forward, and I felt the weight of his power like a physical force pressing against my skin. Release him. Now. I tried to loosen my hold on Theo, but to my horror, the boy's arms tightened around me. No. She's nice, Father. She doesn't treat me like a prince. She treats me like me. Something dangerous flickered across Evren's face. He inhaled deeply, nostrils flaring as he scented the air. I knew what he would detect, my fear, certainly, but also my difference, the wrongness that marked me as defective among our kind. You're from Mid-Mountain, he said, eyes narrowing. Marcus's pack. I nodded, not trusting my voice. An Omega. Another inhale, his expression shifting from anger to confusion, then back to something darker. But you're not correct. The word sliced through me like a silver blade. I flinched, and Theo's arms tightened protectively. Don't be mean, Father, the boy said with surprising authority. Elise is my friend now. Theo, I whispered urgently. You should go to your father. But the Alpha King was already moving, crossing the garden in 3 long strides until he towered over us. I braced myself for his grip, for being roughly separated from the child, but what happened instead shocked me to my core. He reached out, his large hand surprisingly gentle as he tilted my chin upward, forcing me to meet his gaze. Something electric passed between us at the contact, a recognition that made no sense, a connection that couldn't exist. "What are you?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Before I could answer, voices and footsteps sounded from the corridor. The moment shattered as Alpha Marcus, my pack leader, burst into the garden followed by several northern betas. "There you are, Your Majesty, we've been—" Marcus stopped abruptly, his gaze landing on me, then narrowing dangerously. "Elise, what are you doing here?" I opened my mouth to explain, but Evren's hand hadn't left my face. In fact, his thumb now traced an absent pattern against my jawline, as if he'd forgotten he was touching me. "You know this, Omega?" Evren asked, his eyes never leaving mine. "A minor member of our pack," Marcus replied dismissively. "I apologize if she has disturbed you or the prince. Elise, come here at once." I tried to move, but found myself caught between Theo's embrace and Evren's touch. The boy still clung to me, and the Alpha King made no move to release my chin. I stood frozen between the 2 royals, heart thundering in my chest. "She hasn't disturbed anyone," Evren said finally, his voice holding an undercurrent I couldn't interpret. "Quite the contrary. My son seems to have formed an attachment." Marcus frowned. "Nevertheless, she needs to return to our delegation. The ceremony is about to begin, and we all have our places." Finally, Evren's hand dropped from my face. The absence of his touch left me strangely bereft. "Of course," he murmured, then knelt beside his son. "Theo, you must release the Omega now. We have duties to attend to." Reluctantly, the boy's arms loosened. "Will I see you again?" he asked me, eyes wide with hope. Before I could formulate a diplomatic answer, Evren spoke. "Yes." He stood, addressing Marcus while his eyes remained fixed on me. "In fact, I believe we should discuss a temporary arrangement. The prince clearly responds well to your Omega, and he has been unsettled since our return." The blood drained from my face as I realized what he was suggesting. Marcus looked equally shocked. "A loan of personnel between allies is not unprecedented," Evren continued smoothly. "For the duration of the summit, perhaps." "Your Majesty," Marcus began carefully, "surely one of our higher-ranking Omegas would be more suitable to—" "No." Evren's voice left no room for argument. "This one. My son has chosen, and I find myself curious." As the implications of his words sank in, a chill ran down my spine. I looked from Marcus's calculating expression to Theo's hopeful one, to Evren's inscrutable face, and knew with sudden certainty that my life had just irrevocably changed. The wooden pendant seemed to burn against my skin as my mother's words echoed in my memory. Sometimes the quietest voice carries the most truth, but as the Alpha King's gaze held mine with disturbing intensity, I wondered if some truths were better left unspoken. The ceremony passed in a blur of ancient words and formal gestures. I stood at the edge of our pack's delegation, hyper-aware of every movement around me, every glance cast in my direction. My skin still tingled where the Alpha King had touched me, as if his fingerprints had branded me on a cellular level. "What happened in that garden?" Mira whispered, as we followed the procession to the feast that would officially begin 3 days of alliance negotiations. "Marcus looks like he swallowed something rotten, and you're pale as moonlight." I shook my head slightly, unwilling to speak of it where so many enhanced ears could overhear. The Great Hall had been transformed during our absence, long tables arranged in a horseshoe pattern, with the Northern Pack's royal table forming the base. Banners representing each territory hung from the rafters, swaying gently in the breeze from high windows. Our mid-mountain crest, silver peaks against a blue background, seemed dull compared to the Northern Pack's fierce black wolf on blood red. "Later," I murmured, as we took our assigned seats near the far end of our table, the distance from Alpha Marcus reflecting our lowly status. But later never came. As servants began delivering platters of roasted meats and forest vegetables, a northern beta appeared at my side. He wore the black and silver uniform of the Royal Guard, his expression professionally blank. "Omega Elise," he said, his voice carrying just far enough to draw attention from nearby packmates. "Alpha King Evren, request your presence at the royal table." A collective intake of breath rippled through our section. Mira's hand found mine under the table, squeezing in silent support or warning. I wasn't sure which. Alpha Marcus, seated at the head of our delegation, turned slowly to stare down the length of the table at me, his expression unreadable. "Now?" I managed to ask, my voice embarrassingly weak. The guard nodded once. "The prince has requested your company." I rose on shaky legs, feeling every eye in the hall track my movement. The simple blue dress I wore, appropriate for an omega of my standing within my own pack, suddenly seemed woefully inadequate for approaching royalty. I followed the guard through the maze of tables, my heart beat a frantic rhythm in my ears. The royal table sat on a raised dais, allowing the northern leadership a view of the entire gathering. As we approached, I spotted Prince Theo bouncing excitedly in his seat. Beside him, Alpha King Evren reclined with deceptive casualness, one arm draped over the back of his ornate chair, his dark eyes following my approach with predatory focus. "Elise," Theo called out, earning a gentle but firm touch on his arm from his father, a reminder of decorum. The guard led me around to an empty seat that had been placed between Theo and an older woman whose silver-streaked dark hair and regal bearing marked her as someone of importance. She studied me with open curiosity as I stood awkwardly before them. "Sit," Evren commanded, gesturing to the chair. When I hesitated, his eyebrow arched slightly. "Unless you'd prefer to return to your pack." "No, Thank you, Your Majesty." I slipped into the seat, keeping my eyes lowered, hands folded tightly in my lap. "Father said you could sit with us," Theo explained happily, leaning toward me. "I told grandmother about you. She wanted to meet you too." Grandmother. I glanced sideways at the elegant woman, who inclined her head slightly. "I am Lydia," she said, her voice carrying the weight of authority softened by years of wisdom. "Former Luna of the Northern Territories, and mother to our stubborn Alpha." "Mother," Evren warned, but there was fondness beneath the rebuke. "Oh, hush," she replied, waving a dismissive hand before returning her attention to me. "My grandson has taken quite a liking to you, which is unusual. He's normally quite shy with strangers." "I'm honored, my lady," I responded carefully, unsure of the proper protocol. My upbringing had not prepared me for dining with royalty. "You're not eating," Evren observed, nodding toward the plate a servant had placed before me. The portions were more generous than I'd ever been given, the presentation more artful. I'm a bit overwhelmed, Your Majesty." A strange expression flickered across his face, something almost like satisfaction. "Understandable, but you'll need your strength." The implication that I would need strength for whatever lay ahead sent a shiver down my spine. "Tell me about yourself, Elise," Lydia said, sampling a roasted mushroom from her plate. "How long have you been with the Mid-Mountain Pack?" "All my life, my lady. I was born there." "And your parents?" I swallowed hard. "My father was a Beta Guard who died in a territory dispute before I was born. My mother was an Omega healer. She passed when I was 19. "So you're alone," Evren stated rather than asked, something dark passing behind his eyes. "I have my pack," I answered automatically, though the words rang hollow even to my own ears. The truth was that without my mother's protection, my place in the Mid-Mountain Pack had grown increasingly precarious. My inability to shift properly made me a liability, kept around mostly for minor tasks no one else wanted. "Do you have healing skills like your mother?" Lydia asked. I shook my head. "I assist in our nursery, caring for the Pack's children while their parents work." "That explains it," Evren muttered, exchanging a meaningful look with his mother. "Explains what, Your Majesty?" Instead of answering, he turned to his son. "Theo, eat your vegetables before they grow cold." The boy wrinkled his nose but obeyed, stabbing at a carrot with excessive force. I noticed his plate had been carefully arranged to separate different foods, something I often did for the more particular children in our nursery. "He doesn't like when things touch on his plate," I observed quietly. 3 pairs of eyes snapped to me, Theo's surprised, Lydia's thoughtful, and Evren's intense. "How did you know that?" Evren asked, leaning forward slightly. I blinked, suddenly uncertain. I just noticed. In our nursery, we have several children who prefer their food separated. It's common with heightened senses. Theo beamed at me. See, Father? I told you she understands. Everin studied me with renewed interest, his gaze traveling over my features as if searching for something hidden beneath my skin. The scrutiny made me simultaneously want to shrink away and, strangely, stand taller. Your alpha tells me you're 22, he said finally. Rather old to be unmated in your pack's tradition, isn't it? Heat flooded my cheeks. Yes, Your Majesty. Why? The blunt question caught me off guard. I fumbled for a diplomatic response, aware that many ears would be straining to catch my answer. I haven't found the right match yet. His non-committal response somehow conveyed that he knew I was hiding something. Dinner progressed with similar uncomfortable questions punctuated by Theo's innocent chatter. The boy seemed determined to tell me everything about his life, his favorite stories, his pony named Shadow, how the northern stronghold had wolves 3 times the size of normal wolves who guarded the perimeter. Throughout his excited explanations, I noticed Everin watching our interactions carefully, assessing every response I gave, every smile I offered his son. As dessert was served, honey-drizzled pastries filled with forest berries, Lydia turned the conversation toward the alliance. What do you know of the negotiations, Elise? I hesitated, unsure how much a lowly Omega was permitted to acknowledge. Only what everyone knows, my lady. That the 7 Pack seek stronger unity against the growing human encroachment to the east. And what do you think of that? Everin asked, his deep voice drawing my gaze unwillingly to his. I don't think my opinion holds much relevance, Your Majesty. Indulge me. I glanced nervously toward my pack's table, where Alpha Marcus watched our interaction with barely concealed agitation. To speak of politics above my station could be seen as presumptuous. I believe, I began cautiously, that strength comes in many forms. Sometimes the most powerful defense isn't teeth and claws, but understanding. Understanding humans? Everin's lip curled slightly. Understanding differences, I clarified. Fear often comes from misinterpreting what we don't recognize in others. A loaded silence followed my words. I immediately regretted speaking so freely, dropping my gaze to my barely touched dessert. Interesting perspective from one so young, Lydia said finally, her tone unreadable. The feast began to wind down as midnight approached. Packmates grew louder with wine and full bellies, the formal atmosphere gradually relaxing. Theo's eyelids drooped despite his obvious determination to stay awake, his small body eventually leaning against my side in sleepy trust. The weight of him, warm and innocent, awakened something fiercely protective in my broken wolf. I should take him to his chambers, Everin said, watching his son curl against me. I can carry him if you wish, I offered before I could think better of it. Everin's eyes narrowed fractionally. That won't be necessary. He stood in one fluid motion, drawing the attention of nearby diners who immediately straightened in respect. When he reached for Theo, however, the boy grumbled and pressed closer to me. No, he mumbled, half asleep. Want Elise. Everin's jaw tightened. Theo, come. It's all right, I soothed, gently stroking the child's dark hair. Your father will take you to bed, and perhaps we can see each other tomorrow. One amber eye cracked open. Promise? If your father permits it, I hedged, glancing up at Everin. The Alpha King's expression had softened fractionally as he watched our exchange. Yes, he said finally. Elise will be here tomorrow. Only then did Theo allow himself to be lifted into his father's strong arms, his small hand reaching out to squeeze mine once before he laid his head on Everin's shoulder. We'll discuss arrangements, Everin said to me, his tone making it clear this was not a request. Wait here. He strode away, carrying his precious cargo through the crowd that parted before him like water. As soon as they disappeared through a side entrance, I felt the protection of royal attention lift. Almost immediately, Alpha Marcus appeared at my side, gripping my elbow hard enough to bruise. What game are you playing? He hissed, low enough that only I could hear. None, Alpha, I whispered, trying not to wince at his painful hold. The prince approached me in the garden. I was only kind to him, kind enough that the Alpha King himself has taken notice of a defective Omega. His fingers dug deeper. You've hidden your condition for years, but you won't be able to conceal it if he decides to test your shifting abilities. Fear clenched my stomach. Marcus was right. While my pack tolerated my disability because of my mother's respected position and my usefulness with children, the Northern Pack would see it as an abomination. I'll find a way to discourage his interest, I promised desperately. Marcus's eyes narrowed. See that you do, or I'll be forced to reveal your inadequacy myself. The alliance is too important to risk over your pathetic attempt to elevate your status. He released me with a slight shove that sent me stumbling back against the table. Lydia, who had been engaged in conversation with another elder, turned at the commotion. Her shrewd eyes took in my trembling form, and Marcus's retreating back, her expression darkening. "Are you all right, child?" she asked, her voice carrying genuine concern. "Yes, my lady. Just tired." She didn't believe me. That much was clear, but she didn't press further. "Come," she said instead, rising gracefully. "I'll show you where you'll be staying tonight." "Staying?" I echoed, confused, but my quarters are with my pack in the East Wing. Lydia's smile held secrets I couldn't decipher. "Not anymore. My son has requested you be relocated closer to the royal apartments. To be available for Theo, of course. But something in her tone suggested she believed otherwise. She offered her arm, an honor I never expected from someone of her standing, and led me from the hall, past curious onlookers and through corridors I hadn't seen before. The deeper we traveled into the stronghold, the more elaborate the decor became. Tapestries depicting ancient wolf legends, stone floors covered with plush rugs, sconces that cast golden light against wall carvings of running wolves. "You've made quite an impression," Lydia said as we climbed a curved staircase. "My grandson is not easily won over, and my son," she paused, considering her words. "Everin has been changed by his time away. Harder, more solitary. It's refreshing to see him intrigued by someone." "I'm sure it's only because of Prince Theo's reaction to me," I said quickly. "I have experience with children, perhaps." Her tone made it clear she disagreed. "Or perhaps it's because you're different." My steps faltered. Different. She stopped, turning to face me fully. In the shadowed corridor, her eyes caught the torchlight and reflected it back with a wolf's gleam. "You don't shift like others, do you?" The question struck like a physical blow. I stared at her, unable to form words through my panic. "Don't worry," she continued gently. "Your secret is safe with me, for now." "How did you—" "I was Luna of this pack for 30 years, child. I recognized the signs. Her hand, weathered but still strong, caught mine. But what interests me is that my son, one of the most powerful alphas our kind has seen in generations, seems drawn to you despite this. Or perhaps because of it. I don't understand." "Neither do I," she admitted. "Not yet, but I intend to find out." She resumed walking, leaving me little choice but to follow. Here we are. We stopped before a heavy wooden door carved with intertwining wolves. Lydia produced a key and unlocked it, swinging it open to reveal a chamber that stole my breath. Larger than the entire cabin I shared with 3 other Omegas back home, it featured a canopied bed draped with midnight blue hangings, a sitting area before a fireplace where flames already danced, and windows overlooking what appeared to be a private garden. "These are guest quarters?" I asked faintly. Lydia's laugh was warm and knowing. "These are the Moon Suite, traditionally reserved for visiting dignitaries or special guests of the Alpha family." The implication hung in the air between us. I took a step back. There must be some mistake. I'm a nursery Omega, not a no mistake. The deep voice from behind made me whirl around. Everin stood in the doorway, filling it with his presence. "Thank you, Mother. I'll take it from here." Lydia patted my hand reassuringly before slipping past her son. At the threshold, she paused to whisper something in his ear that made him frown, then continued down the corridor until her footsteps faded away. We stood in silence, the Alpha King and the defective Omega, separated by an expanse of plush carpet and worlds of status. I clutched my mother's pendant like a talisman as Everin stepped into the room, closing the door behind him with a soft click that echoed like thunder in my ears. "Why am I here?" I finally asked, my voice barely audible even to my own ears. Everin moved to the fireplace, staring into the flames as if they held answers to questions I hadn't even thought to ask. "My son hasn't slept through the night since we returned from the wilderness," he said, his voice stripped of command, revealing something raw beneath. "Until today, he hasn't willingly touched anyone but me or my mother. Yet within minutes of meeting you, he embraced you without fear." I remained silent, unsure what response he expected. "You smell of honey and wildflowers," he continued, turning slowly to face me. "Pure omega, but with something else. Something I haven't encountered before." He took a step toward me. I took one back. "Your alpha knows what you are," he stated. "He fears I'll discover it." My back hit the wall. "I don't know what you mean, Your Majesty." Another step forward. "Don't you?" The pendant burned against my skin, my mother's voice echoing in memory. "Hide what you are, Elise. Not all differences are understood. Not all wolves accept what they fear." Everin now stood directly before me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his powerful body. He raised one hand, and I flinched involuntarily, drawing a frown from him. "I won't hurt you," he said, sounding almost offended. His fingers touched my cheek with surprising gentleness. "I want to understand." "There's nothing to understand," I whispered. "I'm no one. Nothing special." His thumb traced the curve of my lower lip, sending electricity racing through my veins. "Liar," he murmured, but the accusation held no malice. "Show me your wolf, Elise." And there it was, the command I had dreaded since the moment he found me with his son, the request I could not fulfill, the failure that would expose me as the fraud I was. "I can't," I admitted, dropping my gaze in shame. His finger under my chin forced my eyes back to his. "Can't or won't, can't." The word was painful to speak aloud. "My shift is broken, incomplete." I expected disgust, rejection, perhaps even anger. What I didn't expect was the slow, predatory smile that curved his lips. "Just as I thought," he whispered, leaning closer until his breath caressed my ear. "You're exactly what we need." "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling as Everin's proximity overwhelmed my senses. His scent, pine forests after rain and something untamed, clouded my thoughts, making it difficult to focus. He stepped back, allowing me space to breathe, but his eyes never left mine. "My son is different too." The words hung between us, heavy with implication. I waited, sensing there was more he wasn't saying. 2 years ago, Everin continued, moving to pour wine from a crystal decanter on a side table. "I took Theo into the wilderness for what should have been a brief training expedition. We were attacked. He handed me a goblet, which I accepted automatically, though I had no intention of drinking. Not by rogues or hunters, but by something older, something our kind has forgotten." The firelight cast his face in sharp relief, highlighting a scar along his jawline I hadn't noticed before. Thin and silver, like it had been made by something unnaturally sharp. "Theo was injured," he said, his voice dropping so low I had to strain to hear it. "I did what was necessary to save him, but the consequences were unexpected." "What happened to him?" I asked, drawn into the story despite my fear. Everin's gaze lifted to mine, filled with an emotion I couldn't name. His wolf awakened too early, too powerfully. He can't control it the way he should. Sometimes it overtakes him without warning. I gasped softly, understanding the implications immediately. For a young werewolf, especially one of royal blood, to experience uncontrolled shifting was dangerous, both to themselves and others. "The pack doesn't know," I guessed. He nodded once. "Only my mother and our head healer." If word spread that the future Alpha King can't control his wolf, the other packs might see it as weakness. I finished. "A reason to challenge your leadership." "Precisely." He studied me with renewed interest. "You understand pack politics well for a nursery Omega. I didn't mention that being invisible had its advantages. People spoke freely around those they considered irrelevant. Instead, I asked. What does this have to do with me? Your scent calms him. Evren set down his untouched wine. Your presence stabilizes his wolf. I felt it the moment I entered that garden. His energy was contained, peaceful. Because I'm broken? The words slipped out before I could stop them, bitter with years of shame. His expression hardened. You're not broken. You're rare. You don't understand. I can't shift fully. I've tried. I know exactly what you are, Elise. He stepped closer again, his voice dropping to a hypnotic cadence. An anchor. The term meant nothing to me, but something deep within me, the fragmentary wolf perhaps, recognized the word, stirring with interest. Anchors were once revered among our kind, Evren explained. Omegas whose wolves manifest differently, who can stabilize the shifts of others, particularly powerful alphas who might otherwise lose control. That's not possible, I whispered, even as hope flickered dangerously in my chest. If such creatures existed, I would have heard. They were hunted to near extinction centuries ago, he interrupted, by alphas who feared their power. The ability to prevent a shift could be seen as threatening to those whose identity is wrapped in dominance. My mind reeled. Could it be true? Was there a name, a purpose for what I had always considered a defect? How do you know this? I asked. If they're extinct, my time in the wilderness taught me many things our histories have forgotten. He reached for my pendant, his fingers brushing against my collarbone. This symbol, the intertwined wolves, is an ancient mark of the anchors. Did your mother tell you where it came from? I shook my head, stunned by the revelation. She only said it was a family heirloom, that it would protect me. She was trying to tell you what you are. His hand closed around the pendant, warm against my skin. And she was right about the protection. If others knew what you truly are, what you could mean for Theo. The pieces fell into place with terrible clarity. You want me to help your son? Yes. By staying here, leaving my pack? His eyes never wavered. Yes. For how long? As long as necessary. Fear and something else, something that felt dangerously like belonging, warred within me. My alpha would never allow it. I may be low-ranking, but I'm still part of Mid-Mountain. Leave Marcus to me, Evren said with a dismissive confidence that spoke of absolute power. He'll accept generous compensation for your services. The word compensation stung. So I'd be sold from one pack to another? No. His response was immediate and forceful. You would be honored as the prince's companion and under my personal protection. And if I refuse? His expression darkened. Would you condemn my son to a life of fear and isolation when you could ease his suffering? Would you choose loyalty to a pack that treats you as worthless over a place where you could be valued for exactly what you are? The accusation struck home. I turned away, moving to the window where moonlight spilled across the private garden below. For generations, my family had served Mid-Mountain faithfully, even as we hid our supposed defect. My mother had warned me never to leave the protection of our territories. But had that protection ever truly existed, or had it been a cage built of fear and shame? I need time to think, I said finally. Of course. His tone suggested he already knew what my answer would be, but not too much time. We leave for the Northern Palace at the conclusion of the summit, 3 days from now. He moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the ornate handle. Rest well, Elise. Tomorrow, you'll begin working with Theo. We'll see just how much of an anchor you truly are. After he left, I sank onto the edge of the massive bed, my mind spinning with revelations. An anchor. Not defective, but rare. Valuable, even. The possibility seemed too wonderful to believe, yet Evren had spoken with such certainty. I slept fitfully, dreaming of wolves running through moonlit forests, of a small dark-haired boy who shifted uncontrollably between human and wolf, of a pendant that glowed with blue fire. And throughout it all, a pair of amber eyes watching, waiting, commanding me to choose. Morning came too quickly, sunlight streaming through windows I'd forgotten to cover. A soft knock at the door roused me fully. Come in, I called, hastily smoothing my rumpled dress from the night before. The door opened to reveal Lydia, accompanied by 2 female betas carrying clothing and what appeared to be bathing supplies. "Good morning, dear," she said, smiling warmly. "I thought you might appreciate some assistance preparing for the day. Theo has been asking for you since dawn." The betas moved efficiently around the room, filling a copper tub with steaming water and laying out garments across a chair, garments far finer than anything I'd ever worn. "These are for me?" I asked incredulously, touching the soft fabric of a sage-green dress. "Of course," Lydia replied. "You can't continue wearing the same clothes, and you should dress appropriately for your new position." "I haven't accepted any position," I said carefully. Her knowing smile never faltered. "Haven't you?" She left me to bathe and dress, promising to return in an hour to escort me to breakfast. Alone again, I slipped into the fragrant water, allowing myself a moment of pure luxury. The heat soothed muscles tensed from stress and confusion, and for a brief time, I set aside the impossible choice before me. The green dress fit perfectly, its simple elegance flattering without being ostentatious. As I fastened my mother's pendant around my neck, a flash of movement in the garden below caught my eye. I moved to the window and spotted Theo chasing a butterfly, his small face alight with childish joy. Evren sat on a stone bench nearby, watching his son with a tenderness that contrasted sharply with his usual intensity. As if sensing my gaze, the Alpha King looked up, his eyes finding mine unerringly. Even at a distance, the connection between us snapped into place, electric and undeniable. He didn't smile or wave, but inclined his head slightly in acknowledgement, before returning his attention to his son. A knock at the door announced Lydia's return. When I opened it, however, I found Mira instead, her face tight with concern. "Elise," she hissed, grabbing my hands. "What's happening? The entire pack is talking about how you spent the night in the royal quarters and—" She stopped abruptly, taking in my new clothing. "What are you wearing?" "It's complicated," I said, pulling her into the room and closing the door. "Mira, everything's changing so fast. The Alpha King says I'm something called an anchor. Someone who can help stabilize shifters who can't control their transformations." Her eyes widened. "An anchor? That's just a legend, Elise. You've heard of them?" "My grandmother used to tell stories." She shook her head as if to clear it. "But that doesn't explain why you're dressed like that, or why Marcus is in closed negotiations with the Alpha King this morning." My stomach dropped. "They're discussing me, aren't they?" "I think so," she admitted. "But Elise, you need to be careful. Marcus was furious last night, saying you've overstepped your place, trying to curry favor with the royals. That's not what happened." "I know that," she said soothingly. "But you know how he is. And now—" She gestured at my dress. "You're already looking the part of someone who belongs here." Did I belong here? The question resonated deeper than I expected. "I need to go," I said, suddenly anxious to see Theo, to test Evren's theory about my abilities. "I promised to meet the prince this morning." Mira's expression grew troubled. "Just remember who you are, Elise. Where you came from. Don't let them change you into something you're not." But as I followed a guard to the private garden where Theo waited, his small face lighting up at my approach, I couldn't help wondering if perhaps I was finally becoming who I was always meant to be. Theo bounded toward me, all childish energy and innocent joy. "Elise, Father said you'd come." He wrapped his arms around my waist, and I felt a surge of protective warmth that had nothing to do with my supposed abilities. "Good morning, Your Highness," I said, smiling down at him. "Just Theo," he corrected, tugging me toward where Evren stood watching our interaction with that same intense scrutiny. "Father says you're going to help me with my wolf today." My eyes met Evren's over his son's head. "That's the plan, though I'm not entirely sure how." "Neither am I," Evren admitted, surprising me with his candor. "But we'll discover that together." He gestured toward a pathway leading deeper into the garden. "Shall we begin?" The private garden opened into a walled training ground, sheltered from view by ancient oak trees and high stone barriers. A training dummy stood at one end, scarred from what appeared to be claw marks, while various objects, balls, ropes, climbing structures, were arranged around the space. "This is where I practice," Theo explained, his earlier excitement dimming slightly. "Sometimes my wolf comes out when I don't want it to." "Has that happened often?" I asked gently. Evren answered instead. "Increasingly since our return, particularly when he's frustrated or frightened." I knelt before Theo, bringing myself to his eye level. Can you tell me what it feels like when that happens? The boy's amber eyes clouded with memory. It's like being really angry but not knowing why. My skin gets hot and itchy, and then the wolf takes over, I finished softly. He nodded, looking miserable. Father says I need to be stronger, to control it better, but I don't know how. I glanced up at Evren, who had the grace to look somewhat abashed at his son's words. Turning back to Theo, I took his small hands in mine. Strength isn't always about control, I said. Sometimes it's about understanding. Do you think you could show me what happens? I'll be right here with you. Theo looked uncertainly at his father, who gave a single nod of approval. What should I do? The boy asked. Close your eyes, I instructed, maintaining my hold on his hands. Think about how it feels just before the shift begins. Theo obeyed, his face scrunching in concentration. For several moments, nothing happened. Then I felt it. A subtle change in the energy flowing between us. A quickening of his pulse beneath my fingers. His skin grew warmer, and a faint tremor ran through his small frame. It's starting, he whispered, fear threading through his voice. I'm here, I assured him. Keep going. Don't fight it, but don't rush toward it either. Just observe what's happening in your body. The transformation accelerated. Black fur sprouting along his arms, his fingers shortening toward paws. But then something extraordinary happened. As his shifting reached what should have been the tipping point toward full wolf form, I felt my own fragmentary wolf stir and reach out, not physically, but energetically, creating a stable bridge between his human and wolf aspects. Theo's eyes flew open, now glowing the pure amber of his wolf, but the shift halted, suspended in a half state that should have been impossible to maintain. What's happening? He gasped, staring at his partially transformed hands. It doesn't hurt. Evren moved closer, his expression one of barely contained wonder. You're anchoring him, he murmured, just as I suspected. For nearly 5 minutes, Theo remained in this partial shift, examining his changed body with curious delight rather than fear. I maintained physical contact, instinctively understanding that our connection facilitated the stability. Now, I said gently, imagine drawing your wolf back inside, like gathering up something precious that you want to keep safe. Gradually, the transformation reversed, until Theo stood fully human again, though his eyes retained a faint amber glow. He looked up at me with astonishment. You fixed me, he whispered. My heart clenched. You were never broken, Theo. Your wolf is just very strong and eager. We're going to learn how to make friends with it, rather than fighting against it. Evren's hand came to rest on my shoulder, warm and heavy. Remarkable, he said, his deep voice rumbling with satisfaction. You exceeded my expectations. We spent the next hour experimenting with different approaches. I discovered that my presence allowed Theo to access his wolf form without the fear and pain that had previously accompanied his transitions. By maintaining physical contact, sometimes just a touch on his arm, I could help him find the balance between his human consciousness and wolf instincts. When Lydia arrived with a tray of refreshments, she found the three of us seated cross-legged on the ground, Theo demonstrating how he could now partially shift just his hands without losing control. Impressive progress, she noted, setting down the tray. I haven't seen him this calm since before the wilderness. As Theo eagerly reached for a honey cake, Evren drew me slightly aside, his expression serious despite the morning's success. Your alpha has agreed to release you from mid-mountain, he said without preamble. Though I had expected this, the finality of it still shocked me. Just like that? He's giving me away? In exchange for expanded hunting rights along our shared border and 2 of our yearling horses, Evren replied matter-of-factly. A generous offer, considering your status in his pack. The cold calculation in his voice stung. So I've been purchased, his eyes narrowed. You've been liberated from a pack that never valued you. The transaction is merely formality. And what is my status to be in the Northern Pack? I asked, forcing myself to meet his gaze. The prince's nursemaid? A tool to be used when his control slips? Something dangerous flickered in Evren's expression. You will be under my personal protection, as I said. Your position will be respected. But not equal, I pressed, surprising myself with my boldness. Few are equal to an alpha king, he replied, a hint of arrogance coloring his tone. But you will have privileges beyond most. A place in the royal household, security, purpose. All things I had lacked in Mid-Mountain. Still, the idea of being transferred like property rankled. Do I have any say in this arrangement? For a moment, I thought he might dismiss my question entirely. Instead, he sighed, running a hand through his dark hair in a surprisingly human gesture. Yes, he admitted. I won't force you, Elise. If you truly wish to remain with a pack that shames you for your nature rather than celebrating it, I will honor that choice, though I believe it would be foolish. The concession startled me. And if I choose to come with you, then we leave in 2 days, after the alliance is formalized. His gaze softened fractionally. Theo would be overjoyed, as would I. The personal admission hung between us, loaded with implications I wasn't ready to examine. I turned to watch Theo, who was chattering happily to his grandmother, while licking honey from his fingers. In just 1 day, the boy had progressed from fearful of his own nature to experimentally exploring it with childish enthusiasm. I need to speak with Marcus, I said finally. To hear the terms from him directly, Evren nodded, though his jaw tightened. As you wish. He's expecting you after the midday council session. He hesitated, then added, whatever he says, remember that words can be weapons too. The warning stayed with me as I spent the rest of the morning with Theo, helping him practice controlled partial shifts. A finger, an ear, the slight elongation of his canines. By noon, he was exhausted, but triumphant, falling asleep against my shoulder as we sat beneath an old oak tree. He trusts you completely, Lydia observed, bringing a light blanket to drape over the sleeping child, a rare gift from one so guarded. Has he always been that way? I asked, gently stroking Theo's dark hair. No, she said, lowering herself onto a bench nearby. Before the wilderness, he was open, fearless, too much so perhaps. That's why Evren took him away, to teach him caution. Her eyes clouded with old pain. Whatever happened out there changed them both. Evren mentioned an attack, I prompted carefully. Lydia nodded, lines deepening around her eyes. They were found half dead at our borders. Evren carrying Theo through a snowstorm. My son was covered in wounds that wouldn't heal properly, and Theo... She shook her head. Theo wouldn't speak for months. When he finally did start shifting, it was violent, uncontrolled. And no healer could help. Our best tried. That's when Evren began researching the old legends, searching for answers in histories most have forgotten. Her gaze fell to my pendant. He became obsessed with finding an anchor, though most believed they were extinct. And now he's found one, I murmured, the weight of responsibility settling over me. Found one, Lydia agreed. And apparently decided you're the answer to more than just Theo's struggles. I looked up sharply. What do you mean? Her smile held secrets. My son may be Alpha King, but he's still a wolf at heart. The way he watches you speaks of more than mere interest in your abilities. Heat flooded my cheeks. That's impossible. I'm an Omega, and a defective one at that. You're an anchor, she corrected firmly. A born balancer of power. What better match for an alpha whose strength sometimes threatens to consume him? Before I could formulate a response, a northern beta appeared at the garden entrance, announcing that Alpha Marcus awaited me in the eastern reception hall. With gentle care, I transferred the sleeping Theo to Lydia's arms and steeled myself for what would likely be an unpleasant confrontation. The eastern hall was smaller than most I'd seen in the stronghold, but no less imposing with its carved stone columns and arched ceiling. Marcus paced before a window, his agitation evident in every line of his body. He stopped abruptly when I entered, his cold gaze assessing my new clothing with open disdain. Already dressing the part, I see, he said by way of greeting. I squared my shoulders. Alpha Marcus, you asked to see me. To inform you that your service to Mid-Mountain ends today. He gestured dismissively. The Northern Pack has made an offer for your transfer that benefits our territory considerably. More than you're worth, frankly. The casual cruelty was nothing new, but it still stung. I understand I have a choice in the matter. His laugh held no humor. A choice? Don't delude yourself. If you reject the Northern King's offer, you'll find no place waiting for you at Mid-Mountain. You would cast me out? Though I had expected as much, hearing it confirmed sent a chill through me. In a heartbeat, he confirmed. You're a liability, Elise. Always have been. Your mother's position protected you, but that protection has worn thin. His eyes narrowed. Did you tell them about your defect, or are you playing at being normal? They know what I am, I replied, chin raised despite my thundering heart. They call it being an anchor. It's rare, not defective. Marcus snorted. They've found a pretty name for your inadequacy, then. How convenient. Alpha King Evren seems to think I can help his son. Of course he does, Marcus scoffed. He's desperate. The boy is unstable. Everyone can sense it, though they pretend not to notice. If he thinks your oddity might help, he'd say anything to acquire you. The dismissal of both Theo's struggles and my abilities renewed my determination. Then you won't object to my transfer? Object? I'm delighted to be rid of you. He turned back to the window. The papers are already signed. Pack your meager belongings and be grateful someone finds use for you. As I turned to leave, dignity intact despite his barbs, Marcus added, One last thing, Elise. Don't forget what you are, regardless of what pretty title they give you. In the end, a broken wolf remains broken. I paused at the doorway, my mother's pendant warm against my skin. No, Alpha Marcus. What remains broken is your understanding of strength. I left him speechless, walking away from the only pack I'd ever known with my head held high and a future, uncertain but promising, unfolding before me. The final day of the summit dawned clear and cold, sunlight streaming through frost-etched windows. I stood in my chamber, no longer thinking of it as temporary, and watched servants load carriages in the courtyard below. 3 days had transformed my life completely, shifting my identity from unwanted Omega to valued Anchor, from Mid-Mountain outsider to Northern Pack member. A soft knock preceded Mira's entrance, her expression torn between happiness for me and sadness at our impending separation. So, it's really happening, she said, taking in my packed bags and the new traveling clothes Lydia had provided. Sturdy boots, warm leggings, and a fitted coat in Northern Pack black and silver. It is. I embraced her fiercely. I'll miss you. The only good thing about you leaving is watching Marcus pretend he negotiated a brilliant deal rather than admitting he's losing someone valuable. She pulled back, studying my face. Are you sure about this? The Northern Pack is different, stricter, more traditional. And the Alpha King? What about him? He watches you, Mira said carefully. Not like you're a tool for his son, but like you're his. The observation sent an involuntary shiver down my spine that wasn't entirely unpleasant. He's protective because of what I can do for Theo. If you say so. Her skepticism was evident. Just be careful. Power changes how people see you, and you've suddenly become very powerful indeed. I hadn't considered that perspective. These past days had been so focused on helping Theo that I'd given little thought to what my status as the last known anchor might mean politically. The ability to stabilize or potentially destabilize shifters could be viewed as threatening by some. I'll be careful, I promised. And I'll write when we reach the Northern Palace. After Mira left, I stood before the mirror, hardly recognizing the woman who stared back. The clothing was part of it, certainly. Finer than anything I'd ever owned, but there was something else. A confidence in my posture that hadn't existed before. For the first time in my life, my difference was valued rather than hidden. I touched the wooden pendant, wondering if my mother had known all along what I truly was. Had she kept me in Mid-Mountain to protect me from those who might exploit my abilities? Or had she simply not known there was another option? Are you ready? Evren's voice from the doorway startled me from my contemplation. He stood in the threshold, magnificent in formal traveling attire. A black tunic embroidered with silver runes over fitted leather breeches, a heavy cloak draped over one shoulder. The crown he'd worn during the alliance ceremony was gone, replaced by a simpler silver circlet that somehow made him look more regal, not less. Yes, I replied, surprised to find it was true. Though I'm not sure what awaits me at your palace. He entered the room fully, closing the distance between us with measured steps. A new beginning. A place where you aren't hidden away but celebrated for your gifts. And my responsibilities? I asked, needing clarity. Am I simply Theo's caretaker? You'll work with him daily, yes. But an anchor's role has traditionally been more comprehensive. He stood close enough now that I had to tilt my head to maintain eye contact. You'll serve as my advisor as well. The ability to see beyond wolf instinct, to bridge human and animal natures, is invaluable in diplomacy. Advisor? I echoed, incredulous. I have no training in politics or negotiation. Yet you've navigated the dangerous waters of being different in a world that demands conformity, he countered. That requires more political skill than most formal training. His logic was unexpectedly flattering. And what of my status? In Mid-Mountain, I was the lowest-ranking Omega. In the Northern Pack, you'll hold the rank of Royal Companion, equal to my senior betas in standing, answerable only to me, my mother, and eventually Theo when he comes of age. The elevation was dizzying. Your pack may not accept an outsider in such a position. They'll accept what their Alpha King decrees, he stated with absolute certainty. His hand rose to my cheek, the touch sending warmth cascading through me. But they'll come to respect you on your own merits, as I have. There was something in his gaze, something hungry and determined, that both frightened and thrilled me. Before I could decipher it, a servant appeared to announce the carriages were ready. The journey to the Northern Palace would take 3 days, traveling through mountain passes and ancient forests. Theo, excited by the adventure, insisted I ride in the royal carriage with him and Evren, while Lydia traveled with her handmaidens in a second vehicle. The boy's chatter filled the first hours, his questions about my life in Mid-Mountain and what I might teach him next coming in an endless stream. By midday, however, the rocking motion of the carriage had lulled him to sleep, his head pillowed on my lap as the forests of the borderlands gave way to the steeper terrain of Northern Territory. He's exhausted himself, Evren observed, his voice low to avoid waking his son. The summit was difficult for him, too many strangers, too much formality. Yet he managed beautifully, I said, gently stroking Theo's dark hair. You should be proud. I am. Of both of you. His gaze, when I glanced up, held unexpected warmth. You've given him hope, Elise. Before you, he believed something was wrong with him that could never be fixed. Nothing needs fixing, I replied firmly. He just needs understanding and guidance. As do we all. Evren's hand moved to cover mine where it rested on his son's shoulder, the contact simple yet intimate. I've spent 2 years searching for answers, convinced that somewhere in the old legends lay the solution to Theo's struggles. Finding you feels like fate, or coincidence, I suggested, though without much conviction. His lips curved in a half-smile. My people believe there are no coincidences. Only paths we're too blind to see until we're already walking them. The philosophy resonated with me in ways I couldn't articulate. Had all my years of isolation and difference been preparing me for this moment? This role? As the carriage climbed higher into the mountains, Evren shared more about the Northern Pack's customs and structure. Unlike Mid-Mountain's relatively relaxed hierarchy, Northern Wolves operated with strict protocols surrounding their Alpha King, protocols that had apparently become even more formalized during Evren's reign. After my father died, there were challenges, he explained. I was young for an Alpha King, barely 25. Traditional displays of dominance became necessary to maintain order. And now? I asked, curious about the man behind the crown. His expression turned contemplative. Now I understand that true strength lies in knowing when to show power and when to show restraint. The wilderness taught me that lesson harshly. Will you ever speak of what happened there? The question slipped out before I could consider its propriety. For a long moment, I thought he would refuse to answer. Then, his voice dropping to a near whisper, he said, We encountered an ancient, one of the first wolves, from whom all shifters descend. His fingers tightened unconsciously around mine. They aren't the noble creatures of legend, Elise. They're primal, terrifying in their power. This one had been corrupted by centuries of isolation and hatred for what our kind has become. I remained silent, sensing he needed to continue uninterrupted. It attacked without warning or mercy. I fought it while ordering Theo to run, but the boy... Grief and pride warred in his expression. He wouldn't leave me, and when the ancient had me pinned, throat exposed for the killing blow, my 7-year-old son threw himself between us. My breath caught at the image. What happened? The ancient bit him instead of me. Evren's free hand moved to trace a pattern on Theo's back, where I presumed the scars remained. The venom of a first wolf is potent beyond imagining. It was killing him by inches. I had no choice but to challenge the ancient for the right of healing. You fought it again? Injured? He nodded once. To completion this time. Its blood contained the antidote to its venom. I needed it to save Theo. The implication stunned me. To defeat an ancient, a creature of myth and nightmare, spoke to power beyond anything I had imagined, even in an Alpha King. You killed it. Yes. The simple word carried the weight of impossible victory and terrible cost, but its blood changed Theo even as it saved him. His wolf awakened too soon, infused with ancient power his human side cannot fully comprehend or control. That's why he needs you, to bridge the gap between the two halves of himself, until he's old enough to integrate them naturally. Understanding dawned with painful clarity. And that's why you were searching for an anchor. You needed someone who exists in both worlds without fully belonging to either. His eyes met mine, filled with something that might have been admiration. Exactly. The conversation shifted to lighter topics as the afternoon wore on, but a new understanding had formed between us. A shared purpose centered on the sleeping child who connected our fates. By evening, we reached a northern pack outpost nestled in a mountain valley. Though smaller than the stronghold, it still impressed with its stone walls and central great hall. Pack members greeted their Alpha King with deep bows of respect that verged on reverence, their curious glances at me quickly hidden when Evren introduced me as Anchor Elise, Royal Companion. After a simple meal, I retired to the chamber prepared for me, adjacent to Theo's and across from Evren's in the outpost's private wing. The quarters were comfortable if rustic, with a fireplace already lit against the mountain chill and furs piled high on the bed. I had just finished washing away the day's travel dust when a gentle knock sounded at my door. Expecting Lydia, or perhaps a servant, I was surprised to find Evren standing in the hallway, more casual now in a simple black tunic, the silver circlet absent from his brow. "May I enter?" he asked. His usual commanding tone softened into a request. I stepped aside, suddenly aware of my own informal attire, a sleeping shift covered by a borrowed robe. Evren closed the door behind him, his powerful presence making the chamber feel smaller. I wanted to ensure you were comfortable and to answer any questions that might have arisen since our earlier conversation. "I'm fine," I assured him. "Everyone has been most welcoming. They're curious about you." He moved to the fire, warming his hands. "An anchor is the stuff of legends to my people. Some will see you as a blessing, others as a threat to the natural order." "And what do you see?" The question escaped before I could reconsider its boldness. He turned, firelight casting half his face in shadow. "I see a woman of exceptional courage who has spent her life conforming to others' limitations, rather than exploring her own power. I don't feel powerful," I admitted. "No?" He stepped closer. "You've tamed the wildness in my son with nothing but your presence. You've stood your ground against an Alpha King more than once. You've left everything familiar to venture into the unknown. Another step. If that isn't power, Elise, I don't know what is." His proximity was intoxicating, his scent wrapping around me like a physical touch. "It doesn't feel like power," I whispered. "It feels like falling without knowing where I'll land." "Then let me catch you." The words were both promise and plea, his hand rising to cup my cheek. "Let me show you what you truly are." The moment stretched between us, taut with possibility. I knew I stood at a crossroads, not just between Omega and Anchor, but between safety and risk, between the familiar pain of rejection and the unknown territory of acceptance. "I'm afraid," I confessed. "Of me?" His thumb traced my lower lip, sending shivers through my body. "Of this. Of what's happening between us. It makes no sense. You're an Alpha King, and I'm the only woman who makes me feel balanced rather than broken." he finished, the only one who sees past the crown to the wolf beneath. With gentle inevitability, he leaned down, his lips meeting mine in a kiss that started as a question and transformed into a declaration. Heat bloomed between us, primal and perfect, as natural as breathing. My arms found their way around his neck, drawing him closer as years of loneliness dissolved in the warmth of his embrace. When we finally parted, both breathing heavily, I saw something in his eyes I never expected. Vulnerability. "Stay with us," he whispered against my lips, "not just for Theo, but for me. Be the anchor my son needs, and the partner I never thought to find." The request, so much more meaningful than the formal arrangement we'd discussed, pierced straight to my heart. In that moment, I realized that the broken wolf inside me had never been broken at all, merely waiting for the right pack, the right purpose, the right alpha to call her home. "Yes," I answered simply, knowing it was both an ending and a beginning. Outside the window, the moon rose full and bright over the northern mountains, illuminating a path I would no longer walk alone. My mother's pendant gleamed in the firelight, its twin wolves eternally intertwined, a symbol not of deficiency but of destiny. I had hugged the wrong Omega's pup in a moonlit garden, and in doing so, had accidentally found exactly where I belonged.